Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's session. And thank you for joining us on this final week. I'd just like to introduce our speaker this morning, who's Erica Purvis. Erica is a designer, engineer, and business strategy maker inspired by nature and focused on sustainability, the circular economy, and system change for flourishing people and the planet. Through technical nature, she collaborates with organisations looking to put sustainability and purpose at the heart of their business and innovate around this. Her background and experiences range from working in corporate product development in Philips in the Netherlands to campaigning with national NGO Keep Britain Tidy and coaching with the IET Climate KIC Entrepreneur programmes. This enables her to blend perspectives and bring an empathetic, practical, and of course, insightful approach to all she works with. Erica is joined today by Drew Pullen, who is a creative technologist and physical prototyping expert, and who will put all your questions forward at the end of the session. So do get those questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end of today's session. So for now, I'll hand over to Erica. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Nikki, and good morning, everyone. To start off with, actually, I've got a few disclaimers I realized last night when I was going through this, is that despite the title, this talk does contain quite a bit of eco jargon, which I will not have the time or don't even know how to decipher all of it myself. The other side is around overwhelm. I'm not an expert in this, I'm not an expert in techniques, but what I can share with you is things that I've done, things that I've thought about to kind of get over it. And I think at this time of COVID, you know, this is something probably that we're all facing in many ways as well. But first of all, actually, I'd like to find out a little bit more about who's behind the screens here. And I've got a couple of poll questions to see where you are maybe in your sustainability journey and action. So if I could have the first poll question up, please. So this one's kind of thinking about, you know, what maybe are you finding as a particular challenge in this area to either take sustainable action or thinking in your work. It's multiple choice, so you can pick as many as you want. I'll just leave that open for a little bit to have the responses.
I think it'll be interesting maybe to add that quite a lot of our audience to date has been from the design and engineering background. And so, but of course, please do use chat if you're outside of those disciplines, as I think most of the regular attendees will know that we're trying to advocate almost how do we bridge those departments so that we have more unified thinking, which without stealing any of Erica's thunder is definitely her expertise over many years in the game. So very excited to hear more of the presentation. But I think some of the votes are coming in now. There we go. Over to you, Erica.
Oh, so this is an interesting one. Can they see it? No, I'll talk through it. Actually, I think 100% of you, it's that seeing that customer or citizen demand, I think, for some of the products that you're working on. And then a couple of other high ones are the knowledge and skills, support and internal resourcing, so the people maybe to support you on this journey. And then, yeah, that money, funding and budget, which often comes up, I think, in many things. So hopefully in this, I'll cover some of the different tactics and techniques around getting over those areas or creating demand for more sustainable action. So I think the second question we have is a bit of a kind of one reflecting on how you were able to join today. You know, is it something that's core to your job? So your company actually said, you should join this, it will be useful. Is it something that's connected to your role, but you had to maybe ask, you know, am I able to join this today as part of my work? Or maybe it's something that's not connected to your role. It's something an interest, but your company actually allowed you to do it. And then finally, maybe it's something your own interest and you'll actually have to make up time after this as well. And there is another option there.
I have to say, genuinely intrigued to see what the results are, as without wishing to sway any of the votes, certainly a lot of the reason that the silver lining of this project was allowing it to run alongside company time. So
Okay,
Let's see.
yeah.
Would you like to go through the results, Erica?
Yeah, so I think this one's a really interesting one, and actually something that I can very much empathize with in my journey, is that it's my own interest and I'll have to make up the time. And I think that's something that, around sustainability still now, we're hearing a lot about it, is that it's not something that's recognized as everyone's role or within companies as something that we all need to be working on as well. And then a couple of you, it's connected to my role and your company allowed me. So that's great. So, and finally, just before I kick off, I just want you to take on a moment, and this will be just using the chat, is kind of think about where do you go and what do you do when you want to rest and maybe re-energize yourself. So if you can use the chat for a walk. Yeah.
So yeah, we might just have a few moments whilst people are taking
Take
time
a walk
to
in
type.
the forest, outdoors, connect with nature. Yeah. Any other ones? Sit outside, go for a walk, have a coffee outside. Oh, nice. I just did that this morning, actually. Had a wander around the garden, eating banana,
Gardening.
actually, and put it in the compost. Gardening, yeah. Oh, that, yeah, definitely. I think we've got a lot in common, guys, actually. Because really, what inspires me and what I'm continually inspired and have built into my work really is this love of nature. I've always loved nature. I love being outside, and for me it's actually that go-to place that I go to think, to rest, to reconnect. This is a beautiful magical place in Scotland near where my parents live, called Burnavat. You kind of walk through this stone tunnel and stepping stones to get there, and can imagine centuries of people doing almost the same and finding this really beautiful place designed by nature that really inspires and connects us. On the other side, what I also am really interested in is I love the story of stuff. I'm a designer, and I like things. I like making things, but what I really love is thinking about how they're made and where they come from and who's behind them. This stool is made by my great grandmother's brother, one of 13, when he was about 13 years old. So it's about 110 years old, and he was training to be a carpenter, so an apprenticeship. It's from the northeast of England, where all the coal mining's from, and it's called a cracket. So actually, this stool's been in 4 generations of my family now, and it's probably one of the most useful things I own. We're doing up our house, we stand on it, we sit on it, you can put your cup on it. But what you also see is my grandmother's little heels from when she stood on it as well. So there's so much story around it. And some of you maybe heard about Emotional Durable Design by Jonathan Chapman. And I think this is this great example of some of the stuff around us, thinking about how it's made and where it comes from, but how much of that stuff really around us has that meaning, that usefulness that we're making. So I have these kind of 2 worlds often in my head, but also throughout what I do, this idea of the technology behind stuff and fascination about that as an engineer, but also a love of nature and being outside and thinking about what we're doing and what we can do better to support nature as well. And I think a lot of my work around this has really been exploring those 2 facets and trying to bring them together in the work that I do more fluidly. And I don't think actually I've got there quite yet. And I think that's one of the things about where we are right now in the world. We're still figuring out how with technology can we all, live better and flourishing with nature. So a lot of that work has been around, and I suppose I describe what I do now as sustainable design and engineering. It didn't really have that term, I think, when I started using that at the beginning. And actually, my journey started in Philips in the Netherlands as a product development engineer. I suppose like many of you in that poll, sustainability wasn't actually my role or my job core to it when I started there, but actually through questioning, curiosity, and I'm going to share some little stories around that, it really evolved into almost a sustainable design and engineering lead, like across different departments, and translating a lot of corporate strategy into what exactly does that mean when I'm designing or engineering a product as well. I also, on my journey, got really fascinated in what I saw as the role of consumer or citizen demand, and that playoff, that actually often you design a great product, but no one really sees it or gets it or fully understands the benefits of maybe a lower power motor compared to, you know, a high power motor, and that actually it will be great. And I think that's interesting because in that poll, I think 100% of you saw actually that citizen or that consumer demand for sustainability was something that you saw was kind of holding back potentially some of the thinking and action around that. So I went and I worked for an NGO, a charity around behavior change, campaigning, and also policy work and regulation, seeing also that role around standards, regulations, and moving government strategies around some of these different areas as well. And as businesses, actually, you know, sometimes a campaign can actually benefit, you know, the work that you're doing and help to take some of that innovation out into the world alongside clearer policies or frameworks that really help to shift the agenda forward. And so from these different experiences over the last 7 years or so, I've been working as an independent design studio, technical nature, working with a whole range of different organizations across those kind of different sectors as well. And I call them almost levers for change. The people, the behaviors, actually quite a lot with education, whether it's at a university level or even in schools around sustainable design and innovation. And also, you know, working with products, startups, a lot with startups as well, because I think that's a really interesting area we'll talk about for innovating around sustainability, as well as getting really interesting ideas from. And then finally, the role of policy, working on standards, the BSI, circular economy guidance, and also with charities that might work on improving festival waste, Julie's bicycle, improving festival waste or other kind of elements, such as theatre set design or education as well. So a really wide breadth of different types of organisations, I suppose I bring now to my work. And all of this has been really about exploring, you know, just how really to be a designer in a world that doesn't really need more stuff. And when I say designer, you know, I think actually there's a lot of roles and things in the way the economy is built, from engineers, architects, scientists. We're all kind of trying to figure out how to create meaning and kind of purpose in our work and be more human as we go. Because how we've been working and how it's been going for the last century or so is actually we've been creating a really deadly situation. There's much more technical graphs on this if you want to look up things like the Great Acceleration or the Anthropocene, or things around planetary boundaries, and links are in the cheat sheets around those areas. But actually, when you look to this, and what can really be seen is that since the 1950s, and, you know, really, I would say fast industrialization, technology, speed, a lot of things speeding up, we've had huge changes in a lot of aspects of our planet. A lot of the news has been about climate change. I think that's probably where a lot of those terms, you know, net zero, COP26 coming up in November is very much related to, you know, the carbon and other areas that we're releasing in the air. But around this, you know, we've had, I think, the Amazon, the worst deforestation in 10 years, growing inequality. I read, I think last year in Forbes, that a new billionaire was made every 17 hours during a COVID pandemic, while still, you know, other families or people are struggling for food or to find shelter as well. So it's, you know, huge mass inequality here. Soil degradation, we've only got so many harvests left as we go. Actually, we've created air in our cities and even in London that is dangerous and actually killing people for us in our daily lives. and also mass wildlife loss and species extinction. Around 10,000 species a year, the WWF estimate go extinct as well. So I think alongside some of the big focus areas of business, you know, the carbon aspect, there's a lot of biodiversity, wildlife that's been going on for a really long time as well and needs to be watched. And so when I look at all of this, you know, what it actually comes down to, and I think a lot about is that role of all the stuff that we're making, the resources that we're extracting. And this is a great quote from, you might have read the book Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I think that's how you say his name. Our one screen and blue planet is becoming a concrete and plastic shopping center. And a lot of that is powered by the stuff, the things, the consumption, designed to hugely benefit the few. If you think about some of the richest billionaires in the world, most of them are doing that through selling stuff as well. And so when you get to the root of this and you start thinking about, well, what can I do and how can I make a difference as well? You come across quite a lot of eco jargon, and I've actually, I suppose, thrown in quite a few words more myself this morning. What I'd like to do now is just take a moment to, maybe for some of you here, and maybe you've been to some of the other sessions or joined them, or in your work, or things have come up in the news, is to use the chat and just pop in there a few of some of the eco jargon or sustainability terms that you might have come across either recently or in your work or daily life as well. So let's see how many we can crowdsource here.
I love the interactivity of this.
Greenwashing, oh yeah. Quite a bit more of that going on, I think, at the moment as well. Circularity, oh yeah, that's a popular one. And I think there's a whole talk on that to dig into by Joe from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Vegan leather, ooh, otherwise known as plastic sometimes, or
well, there's also pineapple leather.
Yeah,
there's Pinatex.
Yeah,
just
Pinatex
to throw that
leather.
one in there.
Yeah,
super interesting company.
Any other ones?
I'm going to put in sustainability, and what I mean by that is even that sort of thing of like, well, has that word evolved, do you think, Erica, since it sort of initially was? Actually, who coined it? That'd be really interesting to know, actually. Do you happen to know the origins of sustainability? Where did it come from?
So can't remember the dates, not very good at exact sourcing, but there was a report called the Brundtland one written in, I think, the 1980s, and that was kind of the original coining in modern terms of thinking about, you know, designing now or how we're living for in the future. Can't even remember the exact definition, but actually that inspiration can be traced back to the North America's, the Iroquois tribe that had the 7th generation principle. So what you do now, you should think about 7 generations ahead. And actually, that's one of the areas that's really interesting to look at, is the indigenous wisdom knowledge, or how things are done in some parts of the world still, but also were done as well. So yeah, I believe that's some of the origins. Oh, we've got a whole load more here.
So many now.
Biodegradable, yeah. And recyclable. Oh, carbon sequestration. Yep, I think that's quite a one that the tech focus is also kind of looking at as well. Build back better. Yep, let's carbon pandemic. Oh my goodness, I've not even heard of that one. Carbonomics. Wow, here we go. Loving these. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, we've got quite a few words, and I think you've managed to hit quite a few on, you know, find out quite a few here that you put in the chat as well. And I have to say, I joined a sustainable professionals meeting or meetup the other day myself to find out more about some of them, because I see them popping up in different areas, from environmental social governance reports that then have materiality, and then sometimes it's figuring out, how do I actually use them or connect them in the work that I'm doing? And it can, you know, there are continually new ones actually coming as well. And each of these have different frameworks, different definitions, different lead organizations around it, different templates and timelines as well. So quite a lot going on. Just picking up on one area, and maybe around waste and resource use, is looking at this thing, and I think circularity came up as one of those terms here. And again, tracing back actually, you know, again, there's a lot of, you could look at the indigenous wisdom and living with nature that was much more present in past times, but actually more modern industrial times. Professor Walter Starhol really kind of in the 1970s wrote a paper around thinking about the economy of loops, really looking at that resource flows around that, and how actually you know, we couldn't keep pulling from a finite planet, and how could we actually create jobs and other, you know, things around shifting our economy around this as well. The other one is more recently, I suppose, the term cradle to cradle. I think Judah's a bit a fan of the book as well. And I think this is one actually that I read at university and really changed the way that I, as a product designer, was thinking about the stuff that I was going to go out into the world and start buying, not buying, starting making and selling. Oh, nice. And then, you know, this really started to get shift and raise that awareness and thinking about, you know, what happens to the end of life of a lot of the products we're making, and how can we design and take more responsibility for that. More recently, and a shout out to Joe again at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who did a great talk focusing on this in more detail, is this idea of the circular economy, and where they also developed this butterfly diagram, really separating and looking at those two aspects around technical cycles and biological cycles of the stuff we're making, and then building out different strategies around this. And finally, we have donuts, which does sound pretty tasty. And actually, it's a really great framework that an economist, Kate Raworth, you know, wrote about more recently. And she really intertwines looking at both, you know, the quality of life and the social aspects. So how do you improve those elements while keeping it within the planetary boundaries? So ultimately, you want that safe and just space for humanity in that center of the donut. And finally, maybe this is a bit of a cheeky one, is that actually there's so many terms I realized recently that if you just put a re before it, you'll actually come up with some quite good sustainability strategies or design strategies to really think about or do in your work. So when you start doing something, maybe designing, thinking about an area, you know, manufacturing something, if you put a re into it, you might really think, well, how might I actually redesign this product? How might I rethink how this is done? And how might I potentially make sure my product is able to be remanufactured at the end of life? But yes, a lot going on, and it can lead to a bit of overwhelm as well, you know, just knowing where to start, what's going on, how do they relate to my role, and what can I do? And what I often see, and what I've even found myself, you know, you can end up resenting sometimes all of this priorities or things that you have to work on, or tick boxes, feeling that you have to build into a product that is already very difficult to do. Designing something to take into the market is very difficult to do in many ways. And this can sometimes feel that it's just an extra complexity. I also am an engineer, and I work with quite a lot of engineers, and we like getting into details, and we like precision. Precision is really important for many aspects, safety, health, and all of these areas. But sometimes when it takes getting into strategic decisions or really finding out, you know, what the impact is of some different areas, you know, it's very hard to get precise numbers, and you almost have to get a good enough estimate or good enough feeling to be able to make decisions and move forward as well, because I think that's a really important aspect. And you know, we all like to think that we have the exact things and the right thing to do. I think the thing that also I like to kind of step back and remind myself, and this is a great quote from Wade Davis, who's written a great book on Wayfinder, why the modern world needs ancient wisdom, which I suppose we've already talked a little bit about some of that knowledge that we have now, or where some really good ideas have come from. And I think it's this idea that actually we're overall quite a young species, but then actually a lot of what industrial society and how we've built up how we're making and manufacturing, it's still quite young, it's still quite young, and we're still learning. And I think that's one of the main things about sustainability and working in this area, is acknowledging that it's going to be a continual learning experience, and we're all still on that journey. We've seen some really big things that potentially that we've done not wrong and maybe not thought about, and now it's time to shift and transition that system to the next one as well. So where just to start? And I think, start where we started some of the talk, when I asked you, what do you do to rest, regenerate, and think, and spending time, thinking about these things, taking it all in, grounding and getting out into nature is a great place to start. What I often actually realized was that even though I was working and passionate about sustainability and working on these different elements, was that I wasn't having the time to go out and really appreciate and really integrate nature back into my work. But also this aspect of slowing down. We're in a very fast driven society, lots of constant information. We've all been actually on the internet or online even more probably over the past years, that, this constant bombardment, you sometimes have to step away to be able to, filter it all and take it all in as we go. And this is from a great book by Matt Haig, Notes on a Nervous Planet, that really explores the role of technology actually influences on our well-being. And this is a term that I think, thinking about sustainability, I think this word regenerative will probably be continually to begin to move to the forefront, potentially replacing or really being used a lot more around it. And that's really thinking about actually, we need to improve and make things better, not just kind of keep it as it is, not keep it sustainable or stop making it worse. We've actually done quite a lot to the planet and our lifestyles already, that we need to actually, grow things back, regenerate the planet alongside ourselves. And this will begin to move into, well-being aspects, design, leadership, and businesses more and more. One thing that I've worked with in the past is this idea of the 5 ways to well-being from the New Economics Foundation, where they came up with 5 evidence-based ways of if you build these actions into your life every day, maybe not all of them, but these kind of things will actually improve your well-being. And when you look at them, a lot of them are very much connected to being in nature or outdoors, or you could do quite a lot of different things around it. And I think the other thing to remember with all this, maybe the eco jargon and stuff as work, is actually connecting to community can be a powerful tool as well. And you can learn a lot from what's going on in your local area. I got involved with a local hydro scheme, Reading Hydro, to build a community energy on the River Thames. Quite big ambitions, but actually the turbines are being switched on today. So over the last 4 years, they built a huge community around it, raised over $1 million in community shares, and that's actually becoming action. And so my engineering knowledge, but also communicating and building was a huge support in that area as well. And one company that does this really well, and I listened to a podcast recently, is Patagonia. And they actually even, I think they fund, that they allow their employees to go out on Extinction Rebellion strikes. They fund lawyers to support them if need as well. And I think it's recognizing that we are both, we are in businesses, but we're also citizens as well. So I think that comes to a really important point around finding your people and cultivating environment for change. It never happens on your own. You need a team or a tribe around it. And I think when you look around your job or your roles, or where you're working, it's really good to start these kind of conversations that might start over a coffee or a tea. And what I'm doing is working with quite a few design engineers at the moment in different companies who have maybe started the conversation and built up a small eco team that then potentially grows and becomes a core part of their business and creates a case for change. And the other side is, creating a space and an environment for inspiration, for change as well. This, maybe I'll tell a little, going back to when I worked in Philips, we were part of a innovative environment group, and we created a kind of a space with, some wallpaper, with trees, quite a nice feeling of biophilia. That actually is also another area to bring nature towards you for inspiration. We had Wall-E DVDs that people could take home and borrow, cradle to cradle, various sustainability books. I made the word recycle out of old bits of vacuum cleaners. And we also had loads of different types of products or test bits of plastics and things, because I think quite a lot of it is sometimes getting over the perceptions of what a material might look like, whether it's recycled or an alternative leather, a vegan leather, what it might look like and feel like. And then once you see that and have that capacity, engineers or designers, you can begin to kind of see how you might build it into the work. So a lot of it is then with your team. You're regenerated, you're rested, you've got ideas, you've got a team around you, and then it's beginning to think, where might we want to be as an organization, or what can I do? Understanding where you are right now, and then creating that case to really make that change as well. And what I see is, companies are in lots of different places, and I think you can almost think of it at a different stage. And this yellow line on the bottom, I'm saying, you have to first make it legal. And I know that can also be quite difficult, knowing what standards, regulations, different energy things, different material requirements are around the world for a product. So for startups, actually, to get there and get it on the market on a low budget, it might be that making it legal is your priority. You might have a business embedded with purpose, but you might have to revisit some of those different areas later on once you have that time or budget to go into it. And a great way, I think, to think about that purpose is looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, and just almost on a very high level, thinking, how does my work fit into this as well? What is it that we do around it? Quite a few companies now, from Electrolux to Philips to others, if you look at their sustainability reports, are now, positioning their role as a health and well-being company, or all of these different things, by linking it to what core sustainable development goals are related to them, whether it's good health and well-being, but then also thinking, how might I do this? This sustainable, responsible consumption. So to achieve health and well-being, I'm still going to make sure that I'm also making it circular or sustainable at the same time. And so creating a case for change, you have to look at all of these levels, both at looking at your product, your business model, and what the business is doing, but also at the surrounding ecosystem as well, to help, push and pull, or maybe create carrots and sticks to move your big business forward, or your department, or wherever you're working in sustainability. And these are kind of different core areas that I really look into or pull across the organization when I'm developing or supporting to build a case for change. So policy regulation, there's a lot going on here. There's just, looking up around the EU, there's circular economy plans, there's new repair, right to repair regulations, or campaigns going on around there. Similar in the US, if that's your market, there's different, regulations and standards going on there. So make sure, what's going on around that area that could potentially be of interest to what you're working on. Similarly, competitors and collaborators, there's again a lot going on, and very quickly you can almost find examples, whether they're large corporations really already innovating in the area, or maybe smaller ones on Kickstarter as well, creating new designs or products. I quite like Which, an ethical consumer, for their reviews of different things that can be quite hard hitting, particularly ethical consumer on companies and some of the products or businesses as well. So it's really interesting to see what their ratings are around sustainability. And then what about financial and investment? I mean, this is an area that, of course, particularly in business, I'm not the best financial investment person, but particularly in business, they really, that's often one of the key decision makers around that as well. And then finally, of course, there's a real swell. And I think this is what I've seen change the most in the last years working on this, is just that growth in awareness and really interest in it and demand in sustainability. And then on the practical front, and this is actual almost footage of some engineers or design teams that I work with, and I was like, well, I'm going to show you a big spreadsheet. This is actually how you do it in the end. And you create a spreadsheet and you look at different areas of, sustainability, eco-design elements, from energy use and packaging through to what end-of-life strategy you might have on your product. If you don't already have a product and maybe just an idea, these are almost core areas that you can look at in terms of building into your product design specification. And here, I suppose, are just a few examples from energy labeling in the energy area. So, if you're making fridges, vacuum cleaners, well, not vacuum cleaners anymore, fridges and things like that, then, make sure what energy label you're using. Other ones innovating around, less packaging, like plastic free, and creating whole new business models on, through your letterbox for delivering laundry. If you're working on food related products, then, you don't want to be using bisphenol A, found in polycarbonate, in those types of things. And then other ones innovating around, recycled PLA instead of, virgin materials. And I think Fairphone is probably a standout one around the materials and end-of-life strategies that they've already thought about alongside the conflict minerals. Another really practical thing that I would say is that one of the best things that you can do is to really, see where your things end up, or, look at where other ones are ending up. This is just an example of all the plastic found and bottles and, different drinks containers found at a local wood in a cleanup. And the other one's from my garden, which I inherited, and he was a grower. But every time I clean the soil, I find parts of plastic, from tea bags to little sticky labels that must have been stuck on food when composted, or even, gardening equipment. We had some gardeners in the audience, I know, gardening equipment that then degrades and gets left in the garden. So, that's an interesting area where in the end, it does eventually potentially end up in the soil. Or it might be, they're ending up in recycling or e-waste. There's loads more kind of resale platforms, specialist ones now as well, whether it's tech or fashion or charity shops. And then actually, there's a great new campaign, Recycle Your Electricals, in the UK, which is really looking at e-waste and how much actually is being hoarded in our drawers and unused, and all of those precious metals as well. So really kind of thinking of finding out, where does your product actually go, can be a great exercise. In the UK, for example, in e-waste, we've only got about 57% is really, collected or returned. And in the US, if that's your market, only 15%. So, where is all of the other tech products going? And two companies, example, have, obviously started looking down, their supply chains area, is this idea of, rental instead, and thinking, well, if you want the latest tech product, Samsung have kind of joined with a Get Grover to say, well, actually, you can rent some of our products and have that latest area, instead of maybe them being left in your drawer as you upgrade to the next. And then many of you might have seen IKEA's new buyback scheme as well. So, they will have seen that people are already reselling or reusing their products, and actually they're able to do that as well, and bring it back and repurpose it. And so a lot of this is really thinking about life cycle thinking, or hotspots. And actually, you know, I think there's been a great talk on LCA, and what that was talked about was how at different levels you can really look at the impacts of your products. But actually quite a lot in the manufacturing sector, you can almost tell that it will probably be around your materials and the raw materials and the amounts you're using, or if there's a lot of energy use, potentially your use phase as well. I'm not going to go into detail actually in the circular economy today, because I would just recommend watching the talk that Joe gave on that. But I think that also links to a lot of those life cycle aspects. And I think this area that really is explained quite a lot when you look at some of the sustainability reports of some of the companies that are beginning to disclose these areas. So this is Apple's carbon footprint. And I think you can see, so this green, turquoise and pink area is all actually related to the products that they sell and their usage. And their corporate emissions are like obviously very small. They have offset those ones and reduced them as well. But ultimately, if you are a manufacturer and making things, you know, your materials and the use phase will probably be, you know, the core part of your whole business that are creating impact as well. And that again can be seen by IKEA's, the materials that they're, you know, using for the products, and then actually the use of the products in the home. And that's when strategies around like design for repair become very popular. And I think what's also good is that if you design for repair, it also makes it easy for you to disassemble, refurbish, remanufacture your product as well. Other strategies that are being used more and more are, you know, designing from and for recycling. This is a great new guideline published from the PolyCE, a collaboration between Philips, Paisley Imagination Factory, and an EU-funded project, really disclosing kind of and sharing some of the knowledge that they've learned around choosing recycled plastics and working with them for their products, and also guidelines as an engineer of what to do and how to design for maybe making it more recyclable as well as the end of life. And I think another key area to look around, and I would say Chris Lefferty, who did a talk on materials, would say, you know, actually materials are a really good place to start around your sustainability and the story that you're also making around it. GoMe is a charger made from recycled plastics, but also reused lithium-ion batteries. These are some sunglasses that I Kickstarter funded a few years ago called C2C, brilliant name. They use fishing nets and then create sunglasses to them. Chipsboard is another material startup made from potato waste in a collaboration with McCain, and I think a sunglasses or glasses manufacturer Ace and Tate recently. So you can also buy potato peeling glasses. Mycelium, mushroom growing insulation by Biome. Again, a really amazing startup and with great story and growing fast. And then finally, I actually Kickstarter funded this the other day. It's plastic made from PPE waste. And actually they're making litter pickers. So you're actually able to collect the PPE as well. So I think sustainability or thinking creatively around some of the materials or the products can really create really interesting stories around your product and the problem that they're solving. And a lot of these also design with the whole business model in mind, and particularly with startups that I work with quite a lot these days, you know, they learn about actually, it's not just about designing this product, I have to design the whole system and business model around it. So as a summary of a lot of what I've covered a lot, I know, quite fast, but just a reminder to, you know, dream big first, and that's a great place to start. But also then really understand where you are as, you know, as a product, a company, your portfolio, to then make and understand, well, what are those first steps that I can take on that journey forward? And I think the most important thing is to start it. To be less industrial robot, more human nature. We're working on big things. They can be quite upsetting. We all need each other to kind of get through it. And I think that's the idea of the tribe, is that no one can do this alone, and we really have to kind of collaborate and connect more. And the final thing I'd like to say is just really enjoy the journey. It will be continual, but I think what I find in my time working around this area is that it's an incredibly creative, amazing place to be, and you just meet the most amazing people and organizations along the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. And I think it's just, I was just writing a few tweets as you were going through. And I love the fact that one of your sort of penultimate slides was about telling a good story, obviously about great products, not greenwashing products. And I kind of feel that it didn't plan it this way, but it literally picked up on one of the first speakers, Tom Watt-Smith, of Plastic in the Ocean documentary fame, basically saying exactly the same thing, of that it's so important not to just say, well, the engineering and the LCA is absolutely red hot, the product will sell itself, not a problem. It's realizing you've got to harmonize the you know, the materials, the science, but also the messaging as well. And so I really feel that it's so nice that you've sort of woven all these strands together. And I think as much as I didn't think you need to be quite so apologetic, because I think you've distilled a lot into a small space of time, but it is that thing, I think so many designers and engineers learn by example, and you've gave, you know, some really good cross-industry, cross-product examples in that talk. And truly, I think the benefit of these being on demand is to go back and rewatch and dig into those and look at those case studies from Apple, which are massive documents. Look at Logitech, look at Electrolux, all these great links you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think just around that, it's you know, it's a vast sector, and there's fashion, there's packaging, there's tech products, there's toys. So in each one, there will be their own kind of standout examples to look at, but also looking at, you know, maybe ones not in your sector are also really interesting to push, you know, push your organization or ideas forward.
And I guess one of the questions I wanted to pick up on is that you mentioned it was looking at your tribe. One of the questions from the audience was really picking up on that of you know, what tips do you have for sort of finding your tribe and recognizing it is a long journey together. This isn't a skunkwork project which is going to be done in 6 months and then you're finished. This is in many ways something that could define the future of your career and your mindset at home and at work. So how do you find your tribe?
Lots of different ways, I suppose, and I suppose that in the term tribe, I mix it both in those maybe in the place that you're working, and a lot of that starts with a conversation and being open about what you care about. I think it's potentially bringing more of yourself to work. I think we've had quite a lot of, you know, of time where, you know, it was almost, you've got to be unemotional, you've got to disconnect your private life to what you care about when you go into the office and do your work and focus on this. But actually you almost have to bring more of your whole self and share that. And that's when you see that actually a lot of us share connections and values and want to do more in this, but haven't recognized you know, others around that, because it's just not being talked about. And I think that's where I see that happening. And then I talked about those small eco teams or green teams beginning, you know, and it can be very grassroots, bottom up in your organization. And it might happen after work in a pub, or, you know, when we could do that type of thing, can almost, or over the coffee place as well. But also a lot of with what I do and what I found is that it's not necessarily there as well. It's evening sessions, it's going to you know, weekend hackathons on circular jam or sustainable design things, which I got involved with when I was in London. So, you know, there's your internal maybe company networks, but also reaching out, and I suppose also coming to things like this, where you might see connections and really reach out to them as well.
I love that. And also just, I know Raj is just pulling my leg here in the chat of saying tribalism is frowned upon politically speaking. But of course, we're sort of relating to it more in the way that I would say Google the term Seth Godin and tribes. And it's much more essentially about finding the collective movement and knowing how to integrate that. And effectively, all civilizations have been ultimately tribal in their nature. So I think it's exciting to consider how this moves forward as its own movement. One of the questions from the audience here, materialism has won at the expense of spirituality and well-being. Do we need to address this as a first step? What steps would you take? So I guess a little bit referencing this thing of like weaving it into your daily life, but I'm curious to know actually how do you want to unpack the spirituality and well-being? And I would say, as someone who is, not to get into personal preferences, but even though I consider myself not religious, I still consider the sort of word spirituality quite a sort of secular meaning, in that it's been sort of co-opted now, and that people are still looking for belonging in a movement and looking for more purpose in life. Would you say this weaves into a lot of your work?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely in an area that I've tried to almost figure out how to bring it to my work. I think particularly working in the tech engineering, sector predominantly, it's almost two worlds apart. But actually, some of the work that I do, and that photo near the end was of Climate Kick, the journey that I'm a coach on, and we take 5 weeks students from all across Europe and things on this. It's called the journey, but they learn kind of entrepreneurship skills and everything, or they think they're going to learn about that, but actually they learn more about resilience, reflection, ways to regenerate, and ways to work together as well, and reflecting on what do you really care about, and what can you do. So I think, again, and linked to maybe this term regenerative that we talked about earlier, regenerative leadership is a growing area where it does actually blend much more spirituality, and looking back and to the wisdom of nature as well in design and guidance, and recognizing that to do all this outer work and all this outer stuff, you have to do quite a lot of inner work, and that's actually sometimes the hardest thing to do. And I think linking again to that one of those quotes about this fast world that we live in, that system is almost designed to not give us the time and the space to kind of really reflect on what matters and what you care about, and what really is enough.
Do you think, in a weird way, there's almost, and forgive me, I'm just winging this as a metaphor, but I almost wonder whether there's a little bit of sort of no pain, no gain with sustainability, in that, just to be brutally honest, my experience in it has been that it's always been feeling very fringe. It is painful. It's counter to a lot of the mechanisms of business. I would almost say, if you're doing it right, it is disruptive. It is uncomfortable. People are sort of wide-eyed going, you want us to do what? And you still have to come with the data. You've got to come with the rationale. You've got to come with the evidence to guide people who may not have been as far down the path as you. But I think, what would you say have been some of your, to use the sort of jargon term, sort of change management stories? What have you witnessed as saying that was a moment when the company who thought, we've got nothing to do with the sustainability agenda? When was the moment when they went, I get it, it is for us as well, this is important?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one to go through.
We don't have to mention names, obviously. We can say company X.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a few times I've been, acknowledged, or once you create the case, or just bring, often nobody talks about this stuff or the realities, or shows, what is actually happening at the end of life, and what does that look like, and why are we making those decisions? And I've been told that it's almost like bringing a mirror and that we all need like a mirror to the business to really reflect back on what you're doing and have that time. I've got quite a nice, I always remember working with really high up business manager of a department. and just, you know, on the side talking about stuff that you cared about and what you do. And actually it turned out he was a diver, and he was, you know, seeing the plastic in the ocean. It's like, Erica, I want to do, I want to work on this, but I've got these targets. We need to figure out, you know, how to do that. And, you know, so bringing his real business hat on, but actually bringing himself. And I think when people open up, you know, everyone has, like, this stuff is really big, and they do care about it. So it's almost meeting people where they are, and trying to find ways to almost support building in some of the sustainability into their work or role.
I would say I love that phrase, meeting people where they are. And strangely, it's something that's often used in the toy industry, of meet children where they are. And I think it's such an important provocation, just to unpack it a little bit from the audience, is that it starts from the position of, you may not empathize fully with where someone else is. And I think, you know, we don't need to, again, mention any companies, but I think often a lot of the skill in brokering a new initiative or a new innovation inside a company, or even trying to license it, it is still always down to that human decision. As you said, your contact being someone who's interested in the oceans because they dive. It is sometimes as uncomplicated as realizing, yeah, they've got kids, their kids come home, tell them, oh, you put that in the wrong recycling bin. And actually those things are human. Those, when you have a moment of connection with someone where you both realize, yeah, I know, I've been talking, I've been preaching, and I haven't been doing enough doing.
Yeah.
I think actually it can be a gift when someone comes along with a coherent project and said, look, this is going to be great for you personally. It's going to be good for your career. And yes, we are going to definitely hit some of these sustainability goals, which is very good for the business. As well.
And on the other hand, I think I've also had, you know, I used to do a lot of kind of life cycle stuff for products and different categories and different areas and things. And also in the startup world, you'll have some startups, maybe in an accelerator or something that I'm working on, we'll be like, oh, you don't want to speak to us, Erica, we're not doing anything like our products, you know, and they almost acknowledge from the beginning that our, you know, their product's not going to be sustainable or isn't particularly needed or whatever. But then you're like, hang on, let's actually look at it and let's go a bit deeper. And I think sustainability is not necessarily, I think everyone thinks about, oh, it's the green product, but actually there's so much, you know, we need music in our lives, we need toys in our lives, we need things that create art, and, you know, all of these things, you know, they do bring quality of life in different ways, and sustainability is that social, ethical, and other things. So, okay, you're going to bring that. So how can we do that in the best way? And if we do think from a sustainability, circular, you know, bring in that perspective, actually, maybe we can even make it better as well. And I think that's the other mindset, is that sometimes when it's seen as a kind of a barrier or boundaries around around a product, it can actually open up new and creative thinking and ideas and ways of doing business or design that you hadn't thought of before, without that kind of different perspective or mindset as well.
I think it's so important to stress that for anyone who's sitting here thinking, but what if this, and maybe it won't work, and maybe people laugh me out the room, I can honestly say, hand on heart, and I know that you've had far more years of industry experience than I have, Erica, but honestly, when have you ever not found a team that ended up emerging, even if they acknowledge it's very difficult and painful, out the other side, they're better for it? You know, I've never met anyone who isn't been buzzed and happy that they went that journey. It is the same as walking up a really steep hill, sweating and panting, but going, God, it was worth it, you know. And I do think so. What's your thoughts on that, sort of pulling people through the other side of that burn-in phase?
I mean, I think it's a lot of sustainability. It's like, it's wanting the quick answer, like, well, what is it that you have to do? But like anything, and in innovation, R&D, you know, all of these things, you have to put that same kind of perspective onto it as well. You're working on an innovation project. It's just really, really important and meaningful, you know, now and for the future. And I think when you work like innovation and R&D, it's great. But then with that added perspective of actually, you know, you're really creating something that could benefit the world in a different way or a better way, it just elevates that experience, and extra pride, extra, extra happiness with what really comes out the other end. Because also I meet a lot of designers, engineers who feel guilty, who say, we know we're doing this, we know our products, we're not doing like anything at the end of life, like we're just trying to sell as much as fast as possible and really cheaply, and I want help to overcome that.
I dare I say it, I would throw the gauntlet down to a lot of designers and engineers that, it might actually hurt your career prospects not to engage with this. That if your folio is literally bargain basement, who gives a damn type products, really, how are you going to stay competitive? And maybe just building on that, I love the fact that someone, admittedly, they've said anonymous, which I think says a lot. If doing sustainability right, companies need to be open to the idea that maybe their products shouldn't exist. But that's how capitalism works. And I guess they're provoking the thing of how do you create a safe place of trust within a company, in your experience, Erica, where you can actually confront the notion that maybe this product in its current iteration is a terrible idea. How do you broach that elephant in the room?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we'll see which companies and products survive in the future due to lots of reasons, whether it's regulatory, whether it's just resource, availability and all of that. But I think that goes back to that element of creating the case and really thinking about how do you, with that person or that mindset or that product or that type of business, business culture, how do you then begin to create the case for change as well? And it can take time. I think that's something that I've learned along the way is potentially to be more patient. We have to be patient, but we also have to be, move things forward. But it does take time again to build companies, or for them to be ready to take the leap. Sometimes I, get a little bit of interest from an organization 1 year, but then maybe it's actually 3 years later that they really feel they're in a place, they've got different management, they've got whatever, to move stuff forward. And I think that's the other thing is that people change in businesses as well, and who's there. And I think also quite often you do see that people move. I mean, that's the danger is that you will lose potentially quite a lot of good employees when not taking action in different areas, if they do want this change to happen.
And I've got one last question, but just a nice little comment from Stuart Bailey, who I'm sure you'll remember. Finding your tribe is so true. It seems like decades since we as designers have been talking about this. And I guess maybe just leading on to the last question, as I see Nikki is here saying time is up all too soon. But you've touched on the idea of an ever-evolving journey. Where is the journey going to go next for you?
Ooh.
What's your thoughts on the next chapter?
Yeah, so I'm really interested, and I suppose kind of circling right back to what when I set up as technical nature, it was this idea of, I had this technology brain and this kind of nature love, and how do you really bring them together? I do actually do quite a lot of work with schools now as well around STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, arts. Yeah, arts and mathematics. So I think that's a really interesting areas around education, and I suppose at all ages. What I'm doing a bit at the moment is almost, educating adults within their industry or company as well. But also I think that flows down to other ages. And then the other side is really looking at ways to really combine nature more into my work. And I think I've still not got that yet. I do end up spending, I think as we all do right now, far too much time on screen. I am looking forward to the days of being able to do workshops outside and with again some of the coaching stuff that I've done. It's find a tree and reflect, and that's where great ideas come from. Or we talked about at the beginning on a walk and things, but actually how can we really integrate in a technical world, in a technical focused kind of business or organization, more nature into how we do things, but also yeah, how we blend it into our work as well. So yeah, that's still a experimental journey for me there.
Well, thank you so much, Erica, and I really appreciate your humility, but also the hope and the guidance, and of course, I'd encourage anyone watching this, please do check out the cheat sheets. As always, we always struggle to fill in, you know, a career lifetime's worth of content into just 40 minutes. So Erica has very kindly compiled a lot of other great things to go look at and dig into in more depth. But also, thank you to our audience for really great, engaging questions. Back to you, Nikki.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. Thank you for joining us. You've got such a soft delivery with such energy behind it as well, and I think that really resonated with the audience today. We've had a lot of chat, and everybody's kind of signing off with thanks for the inspirational talk, and I can't thank you enough for that. So thank you for joining us, Erica. Thank you for everybody that's joined us this morning, and thank you if you're watching this on demand, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.